Hey y'all, welcome back. My name is Christina, and on this channel I like to talk about the baby whisperer Tracy Hogg and her book, The Baby Whisperer Solves All Your Problems. And I also just like to talk about ideas and things that come from her book and ways that I've implemented her book with my daughter, who is now almost 18 months. Today in this video, I'm going to focus on the 3 to 4 month routine transition, and we're going to talk a little bit about why it's necessary, why to do it, how to do it, and when to do it. So once you have your baby, your focus for the first 3 months of their life is to have them on a 3-hour schedule. And so that looks more at the beginning of a 2 to 3 hour schedule, and as they continue to grow, the goal is to make sure they get to a 3-hour schedule. And what I mean when I say 3-hour schedule is 3 hours between each feed throughout the day, and that doesn't necessarily apply to nighttime feeds. You'll likely see possibly a couple nighttime feeds even up till 3 months, and then you'll start to see them, you should start to see them during the 3 months go away, and they might not be as consistent as the daytime feeds, but your goal is essentially to make the daytime feeds 3 hours apart with a dream feed, and to eliminate nighttime feeds as your baby doesn't need them anymore. So it's a great way to remember it, that by 3 months your goal is to be on that 3-hour schedule. You may get to that a little bit before 3 months or even a little bit after, depending on your child, but as long as you are working towards that, then you are moving your baby in the right direction. However, once you get to that point and once you hit the 3-month mark, it's time to start thinking about the next routine transition, which is a transition to the 4-hour schedule. And you can think of it like they should be on 4 hours by 4 months. And so this 4-hour schedule means that they will be feeding during the day every 4 hours. They'll still need a dream feed, and hopefully by 4 months, once this schedule is implemented, you should not need any nighttime feeds after the dream feed, and your baby should be able to sleep at least 8 hours every night. I love the 4-hour routine. It is my favorite one out of every single schedule that my daughter has ever had, and it's really just a huge relief to parents when they get their child on this routine. It also lines up with sleep training if that is something that you need to do with your child at 4 months. It's the perfect routine to sleep train to, and it just gives you as a parent a huge break from constant feeds, as well as gives you longer naps so that you can have more personal and alone time to yourself to do whatever you need. So first, thinking about why we should do this. If our child is already on a 3-hour routine and they're 3 months old and they're perfectly happy and content with it, then why should we transition them to the 4-hour routine by 4 months? And the answer to that is just because it's age appropriate. There's a huge transition that goes on in our babies between 3 and 4 months, and that is a brain transition as well as a stomach transition. So in their brain, their circadian rhythm matures, and they're actually able to get tired at the same time every day. That's why when you sleep train at this point, you sleep train more to a clock than to your child's cues, even though you do want to see their cues for when they're tired. But their sleep cycles do mature as well, and they become more of a rhythm that matches an adult's rhythm than a baby's. And so they're able to actually take longer naps during the day and to stay asleep longer at night. Additionally, they're constantly growing. There's usually a growth spurt around this time as well, and your baby's stomach is going to grow and be able to hold more milk. So feeding them every 3 hours is actually not appropriate at this time, because their stomach is able to hold enough milk to help them last 4 hours. If you keep your baby on a 3-hour schedule for too long, then when it comes to eating, they're going to become a snacker. And a snacker is a baby who doesn't take full feeds at every feed, but they're constantly just snacking and having a little bit throughout the day to sustain them. So what you really want is at every feed that they completely fill their stomach, and before the next feed that's when they actually start to be hungry. And this helps set the precedent for healthy eating behaviors for when they turn 6 months and you start them on solids. And honestly, it sets the precedent for the rest of their lives to not just be constantly snacking throughout the day, which is something that I think a lot of infants and toddlers might do that we don't even notice, but to actually take in full meals and to take in enough of what is needed to help sustain them. Additionally, during this time, their wake window expands. So that's something that between 0 and 3 months that you witness. Essentially, your baby's wake window goes from like 20 to 30 minutes to an hour and a half, and that's with the 3 hour. And you will see between 3 and 4 months that wake window will jump from an hour and a half to 2 hours. So it's not appropriate for them to nap more frequently. They need to be awake longer because they can be, and sleep longer because they can, and it's better for them. And if you keep them on a 3-hour schedule for too long and they're taking an additional nap, because essentially once you transfer to the 4-month schedule, they drop a nap. So if they have that nap in there, they're not going to be tired enough at bedtime because they napped too much during the day. So you need to keep an eye on your child's wake window and see if it begins to get longer around this time. Because if you are putting them down for too many naps and helping them get too much sleep during the day, then at night you're going to see that they're just not tired enough to stay asleep. Now the when it happens, I've been saying 3 months to 4 months, and this looks different for every single child. If your baby is successfully on a 3-hour schedule very consistently at 3 months, you want to transition them to the 4-hour schedule before they turn 4 months. Especially if you are planning to sleep train doing pick up, put down at 4 months, you want your baby to be on the 4-month schedule before you do pick up, put down with them. And if you do a different method of sleep training, I would even suggest the same thing. This is a really great schedule to sleep train to, and to teach your child what time that they would take naps during the day and what time bedtime is. If by 3 months your child is not on a 3-hour schedule, you should still get them to that 3-hour schedule, but you may not stay on that 3-hour schedule for very long. If by 3.5 months they're on the 3-hour, then you would start to transition them to a 4-hour. And if they're already 4 months and you haven't had them on any type of routine or anything whatsoever, and it's not a 3-hour routine, it's good to just jump to the 4-hour routine. And that is just what's age appropriate for your child at this point, and they're going to take it pretty well even if you haven't had them on a routine at all until this point. It can be a little intimidating to transition them to this structured routine, especially if it means dropping a feed and dropping a nap, but it's something that's good for them. And so my daughter personally, by 12 weeks, she was on a 3-hour schedule. I found the baby whisperer at 11 weeks. And so in 1 week, I was able to tell that my daughter was successfully on that 3-hour schedule. And about 2 weeks after that, I decided to try out the 4-hour schedule. And she just immediately took to it very quickly. I was actually just going to test it for a day, and it just became our new normal right after that. And it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. But for other children, it could be a little more difficult. So you can always take the transition more slowly. It's just important that we're pushing our child to act age appropriately and we're not holding them back from what their potential is. So now the bulk of this is how do you transition them from that 3 to 4 hour schedule, especially if you are comfortable with the 3-hour, everything seems to be going well, and you're finally getting some peace with the whole parenting and new baby thing. It can be difficult to let go of that and transition to a different routine. I could completely understand if you have any hesitation with wanting to do that, but it is very important that your child is on a routine that suits their needs best. So up here on the screen, I'm going to put side by side Tracy Hogg's sample schedules for a 3-hour schedule and a 4-hour schedule. And what you can see is these are like listed with times next to them, and that doesn't necessarily need to reflect the times that you do them. This is more of a routine and less of a schedule. I know I use the word schedule a lot, and that's just my brain, but Tracy never calls it a schedule. It's always a routine, but you are going to do it to certain times during the day. You're going to have a nap time, you're going to have a bedtime, and you're going to have a wake time. You'll also have times that you eat. And it's just the same as when we go to bed, and we have certain times that we eat meals as well. So you'll see these side by side. The 4-hour schedule actually to me looks a lot more neat and concise. It is very straightforward. It includes 2 naps plus a cat nap. The cat nap should never be more than 40 minutes long. If it's any longer than that, then your baby's bedtime is going to get messed up. But the times that you want to pay attention to the most are the bedtime and the wake time. We always want to keep these times consistent, and that is what helps set the precedent for the rest of the day. So if you let your baby sleep in until 8, then your entire day is going to be shifted off because of that. And what you really want is to make sure that they have the same wake time every single day, and that will result in the same bedtime by the evening. And when it comes to nighttime sleep, your baby should be sleeping 11 to 12 hours every single night. This does include a dream feed. So do your dream feed anytime between 10 and 11. I always did mine at 10:30. I was done by 11, and then I was able to get 8 hours of sleep, and that's something that I preferred. Some people prefer to do it a little later or a little earlier. It's really whatever works for your baby and helps them to get that 8 hours of sleep until 7 a.m. or whatever time you decide to wake them up. But it should never, the dream feed should never happen after 11 p.m. Then it just becomes a nighttime feed. And it's totally fine if you do have a nighttime feed during this time. If it's an early in the morning feed around 5 or 6, then your goal should be to just push your child to 7 o'clock and get them there. I'm gonna go into a couple more specific tips here, but if you are struggling with a 5 a.m. or a 6 a.m. wake up or any time in between that, and your baby is hungry, first of all, don't feed them unless they are hungry. If they wake up in the night and you don't know for sure that it's hunger, don't feed them. That is a habit that you'll have to break. And we talk about habit breaking and things like that in one of my other videos, the videos that talk about sleep in infants. And I'll link that up here as well. But essentially, if you are having a 5 to 6 a.m. wake up time because your baby is hungry, the way that you get rid of that is by having that consistent 7 a.m. feed time. And again, it can be any time, whatever the morning is. But that morning feed is what will get rid of a 5 or a 6 a.m. feed. Your baby will learn to wait for the 7 a.m. feed. So if they wake up at 5:30 in the morning, you feed them, you put them back to sleep, and then you get them up again at 7. And that will completely, after a few days, get rid of that wake time. That is a tip that I don't even think I got from the Baby Whisperer thing. I got it from a friend who did something very similar to the Baby Whisperer, but it's what saved me from those really early morning feeds and starting my day too soon. You want to still treat it as a nighttime routine and put them back to bed. If they are waking up at like 6:30, if it's 30 minutes within that morning wake time, then you would just treat that as an early wake up time, and eventually they'd get to 7. But if it happens before 6:30, then you have to also do the 7 a.m. feed, even if they don't eat necessarily. And if they aren't taking the 7 a.m. feed after you gave them a full feed at 5 or 5:30, then you can try to give them like a half feed at 5 or 5:30 and then complete the feed at 7, and that will help them transition as well. You see the 3-hour compared to the 4-hour schedule, you're dropping a nap and you're dropping a feed. And you might actually already, if your baby is on a 3-hour schedule and they're 4 months or older, you might see that they don't take a cat nap, or that they're skipping another nap, that they're not necessarily hungry between feeds, and they could be sleeping very well through the night because they're overeating during the day. That is a possibility as well. But you also could just be really comfortable in this 3-month routine, and it could be kind of nonsensical to you to try to get to the 4-hour. I personally think that the 4-hour just looks so good. It's 2 2-hour long naps plus a 40-minute cat nap and an ideal 11 hours of sleep, including a dream feed. And that just is going to refresh you completely as a parent. So I do highly encourage that transition. And I do have some tips here for how you can actually make that transition happen. So you're gonna start in the morning by having that same morning wake time and feed time. And during their activity, you're going to try to push them to be awake for 30 minutes longer. And they may start to show cues around their usual nap time of tiredness. But because their circadian rhythm is now more mature, they can be pushed a little bit to stay up a little later and go to bed 30 minutes past when they are used to going to bed. And so obviously the thing we want to avoid here is an overtired baby. We do not want to just ignore cues and push them too far, because then they will not have a good nap. We want them to stay awake as much as they can and then have a good nap, a good 2-hour long nap. You'll start in the morning by pushing your baby's nap time back that 30 minutes. So instead of going down for their 8:30 a.m. nap, they'll be going down for a 9 a.m. nap. And this might be difficult. It could be very easy, especially if your baby is ready for this transition. But if they are showing cues of tiredness at 8:30 and you are finding it difficult to keep them up until 9, then you can take this a few days at a time. You can start by doing 10 to 15 minutes longer of that wake window to try to get them to that 9 a.m. nap time. And it might just take them a couple days to adjust to having a longer wake window. Another thing, just a fun fact about babies, is that their wake window in the morning is usually their shortest wake window of the day. So you could even start to see that their other wake windows are getting longer. They are getting closer to 2 hours, but your baby is clinging to that 1.5 hour wake window in the beginning of the day. And that is completely normal, but you should try to push them a little bit, because it's just not age appropriate for them to only have a 1.5 hour wake window. Just make sure that they're not oversleeping, undersleeping, or the rest of their naps aren't being affected by a shorter wake window in the morning. It's really not that big of a deal, but we can't just expect that our children will naturally adjust to the 2-hour wake window. Some babies might. They might adjust before you even try to get them to adjust, but most babies are going to need a little push and a little help to get there. So once you get your baby to take a nap at the time they're supposed to, now at 9 a.m., now the goal is to get them to nap for 2 hours. And so if you are sleep training during this time, then you would be doing the pick up put down method to extend their nap to 2 hours if they wake up early. But if your baby is already sleeping independently, if you've been doing the 4S method and they sleep pretty well and they're able to get themselves back to sleep by self-soothing, then you would just let them sleep until their next feed time, which would be at 11. And if they wake up before, then you as a parent have to commit to the nap being long. So if they wake up at 10:30, you can't just say, okay, great, your nap's over, it's time to eat. You have to go in there and you have to do whatever it is that you do to put them down, whether that's the shush pat or whether that's pick up put down. And even if they don't go back to sleep, you don't let the nap be over until it's supposed to be over. If you do just let the nap be over whenever your child says it's over, then they're not going to develop the ability to have a longer nap, and you're going to see that they might never actually take long naps. And another thing that you want to look out for too is their sleep cycles. So a sleep cycle in an infant this age would be about 45 minutes long, and they might wake up after an hour and a half, because that's 2 sleep cycles. And the goal is to get them to link a 3rd sleep cycle together at the end of that and to make that a 2-hour nap. And if your child is struggling to do that, and a sleep cycle could be anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. So even if it's like an hour-long nap or anywhere between an hour to an hour and a half, and it needs to keep going to the 2-hour mark, then your trouble here is just teaching your child that they need to continue their nap. And it's actually something that babies can learn very easily at this stage, especially if you are using Tracy Hogg sleep tools to help them sleep longer and help them nap. But essentially the goal here is to teach them, now your nap is 2 hours. And you can wait until the nap is over to wake up, even if they are a little awake before. The important thing here is that we need to detect hunger. So we don't want to starve our child, and they will not starve over a 30-minute difference in a meal time. But if they are truly very hungry and they are closer to 3 months old, then they might not be ready for this transition. But if they are closer to 4 months, they could just be hungry out of habitual eating. Like if you eat a meal at the same time every single day, you're going to start to get hungry at that time. And the goal is just to move that habitual hunger to 11 o'clock instead of having it be earlier. So obviously you know your baby best and you know if they're capable of doing this or not. So just be wise in that. Don't push your baby too far past their limits, but don't coddle them either. If they're taking things very well, then it might be a little hard to see them have to wait longer for a meal or have to go to sleep if they're not necessarily tired, but it's really for their good in the long run. And keeping them and holding them back to a schedule that's not age appropriate is going to do them more harm. So essentially this is what you do for the rest of the day. Every wake window you push to 2 hours, and every nap you push to 2 hours, and naturally your feed times will happen. And you might even see that your baby is eating even a little longer and throughout the day because you are dropping that feed, so they should be taking in more milk at each feed as well. And if you're bottle feeding and formula feeding, you might even need to add an extra ounce or two to the bottle to make up for that lost feed that they dropped. And so it could take a few days. It could just be like me with my daughter. I just tried it and she was able to stay up and able to nap long, and it was amazing. And then I did pick up, put down about a week or two after I transitioned her to a 4-hour schedule. So by that time she was super used to the 4-hour schedule, and I think that that helped her take sleep training very well. So if you're already sleep training and you're having a difficult time with it, or you're thinking about doing it soon, you definitely need to do that transition to the 4-hour schedule ASAP. And if your baby's past 4 months old, then you also need to do this transition. This is a very important schedule to have as well for when your baby starts solids. My daughter started solids around 5.5 months or so, so she was already on this schedule for about 2 months before she started solids. Once you introduce solids, you're going to be introducing 3 meals a day, and you're not going to be dropping a feeding session, like a breastfeeding or a formula session during that time. And so it's important to be on this schedule so that when you do introduce solids 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they're also used to the amount of times that you are breast or bottle feeding, and they have the correct nap times all lined up for that as well. That is about all I have for the 3 to 4 month transition. I know it's probably a lot of information, so please let me know if you have any questions or comments down below. I would also love to hear from you, any feedback about this video, any of your own experience with trying this with your babies. And if you have any questions or suggestions for next videos, I would also love to hear that as well. Make sure you stay subscribed so that you can be aware when new videos are coming out. I know I haven't had a new one in a while, and it's just because I've been on vacation, but I hope to be doing a video every week or every other week as I continue to make them. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and thanks for watching.